In this lesson, we're going to discuss how to pass arrays as arguments to methods. And in that respect, it is almost exactly the same as passing lists to methods. So you really won't be seeing too much new or things you don't already recognize, just in a different context with arrays instead of lists. So let's take a look at how to do it. We'll start out by creating a method for building an array. We'll call it build array. We'll pass the array as the first parameter, so to do that we write int for an integer array, and then open and close brackets to indicate that the parameter is an array. Then we want to pass the size of the array, although as you'll see in a moment that is actually an optional parameter. But traditionally you've always passed the size of an array to a method. And then finally, because we're going to build a random set of numbers, we want to limit to how large the random number can be that's going to be in the array. So that will be what limit represents. So the first thing we're going to do is create a random number generator object. Now we're ready to write our loop, so we'll say for int I equals 0, I less than size, plus I, array sub I is equal to rand next 1 limit. So that whatever number we set to limit will be the largest number generated as a random number. Now let's build a method that displays an array. And this time I'll demonstrate how to do that without passing the size. So we'll have a second method, static void display array, and the only parameter will be the array itself. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say for int I equals 0, I less than array dot length plus I. We're just going to display the contents with the space between each array element, and we'll keep our example short so that we don't go over one line. So it's going to be array sub I plus concatenate a space. Now what we're gaining by doing this is not having these messy loops in the middle of our main program. Not that they're that long, but they just detract from the main part of the program. So much better to have a method call than messy code that is contained in the method call. Alright, so let's test these two methods. First thing we have to do is create an array, but before we do that, let's create a size for our array. And let's say 10 items. We'll set it as a constant. Then we'll say int numbers equals new int size. Now we're ready to build this array, so we'll write build array numbers size, and let's say we want our limit to be 100, so we'll say 101, since we know that's the random number generator's limit for 100. So that will build an array of 10 elements in the range of 1 to 100, and then let's display the array, and then let's have a console read key. So let's run this program, and there's our array. If we were using this program to, say, test a grading program, we might change that limit and change the build array to go from 50 to 100, just to more reasonably represent a set of grades, since most students don't score below 50. But I'm not going to change it just because it's working well for this example, so we'll leave it like it is. So we saw how build array will build the array using standard techniques. Display array does the same thing, displays the array again using standard techniques. Now, the last thing I want to demonstrate is the fact that, like lists, arrays are reference objects. So when I pass an array to a method and make changes to that array, those changes are reflected back in the main program because we're working with a reference object and not a value object. So let's write a little program, and we'll call it curve. And it will take an array and a number of points you want to curve the grade by. And so we're going to write for int I equals 0, I less than array dot length plus I, array sub I plus equal points, and then close it off. So we can come back to our main program, call the curve method with numbers, and then display it again and see that it worked. So, I forgot the points. So let's add the points. Let's say 5. Let's add a console write line to write an empty line between those two displays. Let's try it again. And there you can see that each grade was increased by 5, or each number. I'm just assuming the grades. So here you've seen three examples of how to pass arrays to methods. And I purposely, in the build array method, included the parameter for size just to demonstrate that we don't actually need it. Some programming languages force you to pass the size of the array to a method, but C# can determine that even inside a method using the length property. And finally, I demonstrated that arrays are reference objects, just like lists are, by passing an array to a curve method that added points to the array that was passed in as the argument. So now we're ready to move to the next couple of lessons where we're going to talk about two-dimensional arrays, which are used to store tables of data, such as what you might see in a spreadsheet. And we'll look at that in the next lesson.